Hello, and welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. It's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. What should we talk about today?
I think we should talk about money. Money!
You really hit the nail on the head there.
Money!
Good. Let's talk about money.
Let's talk about money.
In a serious way. I think it's a very serious subject.
It's very serious.
I think, you know, one of the problems, so we're recording this on election day, and, you know, emotions are running high, I think it's fair to say.
What is our emotion? Hilarity? Entertainment?
I mean, I'm thrilled to be talking about money.
Yeah.
Instead of the election.
I think we timed that quite well, actually. I'm sure churches across America were
obsessing about the election.
Yeah. And so we're like, we're going to talk about money today.
Why not?
We're going to choose something else to make you all uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a nice alternative, isn't it?
And,
Tony Blair once said, I think during the run up to one of the elections in the UK, he said, "This is a good week to bury bad news."
Yeah.
So it's like, with all this stuff about the election, let's talk about money. It's a good week to bring it up.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's good news. I think they got it. It's not bad news. But we think of it as that way, right? But what the Bible says to have about money and what Jesus calls us to is good news. It's financial freedom, not being a slave to money.
I think you get a lot of that in this. So, I mean, last week was an interesting passage to preach because, to some extent, quite a bit of strong language. Paul is saying that this is genuinely a matter of life and death. And not only that, but the kind of death future that you might have as a lover of money is going to manifest in all sorts of horrific ways now. So human misery and eternal suffering, the collapse of faith, these are all the images and ideas in chapter 6 to do with money.
The verses, those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a really strong language. And he's used strong language to pastors as well. Teach and urge. Really go for it. Talk about it.
I like the clarification you had. It's not, people often say money is the root of all evil. It's in the Bible. No, right. The Bible does not say that. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. So money and economics is not the fundamental reality. So this, according to the Christian gospel.
And this really is what I want to get into this week, if we can. Paul has already said in verse 6 that godliness with contentment is great gain.
Yeah.
And he's also said in verse 8 that if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. And so as we pick up the story in somewhere around verse 17, and maybe we will include a little bit before that as well, we have this idea of what it looks like to enjoy money. So it's a very positive view of money, I think, toward the end of this letter. How can you use money in such a way that it benefits people and you have a good time?
Yeah. So he talks about how, verse 16, how God alone has immortality, dwells in unapproachable light, whom no one has ever seen or can see. To him be honor and eternal dominion.
Honor.
The
money language.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. There it is.
It's the same thing, right? Honor. Honor widows who are truly widows. Honor your Christian teachers and honor people that you work with.
So it's a matter of worth, right? Like they are worth honoring with financial. So, but God is the ultimate bearer of worth. He's not the bearer of worth, the haver, the possessor of worth. So, and he's the king. And so, verse 17, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty. What's haughty mean? Proud?
High-minded.
High-minded.
Lofty in mind. Arrogant.
Arrogant.
Yeah.
Pride cometh before the fall. right?
Yeah, and it's what's kind of funny is it doesn't say, as for the rich in this present age, get rid of all of your money. It doesn't say that.
He calls, yeah, that's true.
It's intriguing, with the rich ruler, the rich young ruler, or the rich young man, or what have you. Jesus says to him, "Go and sell all of your possessions. One thing you lack. Go and sell all of your possessions and follow me." And he goes away sad. And that isn't a kind of universal command for everybody, everywhere, everywhen, that you must always sell everything you have to follow Jesus. That young man had a problem he had a drastically, his throne was drastically demonized.
Do you think that a lot of people take that interpretation as I mean, I agree with that interpretation, but do you think sometimes people take it as a cop-out? Like, well, okay. It seems like the logic always goes like this. Like, Jesus was talking to a man confronting his idol. Mm-hmm. That's not my idol, so therefore I don't need such an extreme treatment.
Well, that might be true, but it isn't to say that you don't need a version of that treatment.
Yeah.
And of course it might be. You might be in the same extreme position as that man. It would seem to me likely that it's quite a common problem.
Yeah.
Otherwise Scripture wouldn't address it. And just from experience, it seems like a fairly common problem that money would get between you and God. So yes, if money has got between you and God, get rid of it. In the same way that if lust has got between you and God, get rid of your eye.
Yeah.
Take drastic measures.
Drastic measures. And I think that's a really important thing.
But being rich is not, it might be more of a dangerous place to be, but it's not a barrier to salvation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we've got a problem that's bigger than God's ability to solve, which means we've got a whole problem with our religion. But also, Paul says here in verse 17, as for the rich in this present age, here's what you need to do. Make sure, one, you're not haughty, which is high-minded or snobby or what have you. Yeah. And two, don't set your hope on the uncertainty of riches.
Yep.
Right. So he doesn't say, get rid of your money. He says, don't trust your money.
Yeah.
That to me, I think, is really significant because we are the rich, right, in America today.
Yeah.
We have we have infinitely more televisions than Robin Hood.
What is I'm actually interested in like what the where the average Fox Chapel, what's the average Fox Chapel salary or net worth compared to the mean of throughout America?
I don't have current stats, but I looked it up years ago, and the average salary in Pittsburgh was about $56K, and the average salary in Fox Chapel was, I think, about 160. But that Fox Chapel number was including the zip code, so it was including parts of the zip code that actually have much less money on average.
So for a lot of folks in our town, that there's a lot of money coming through and a lot of dealing with large amounts of money, right? And large expectations surrounding money.
For sure.
So this is just a thing that I think is I think it's something to really, that we all have to be really wary, I think, sometimes because Jesus says some pretty radical things about money.
He does, and we also have to figure that we're bringing people into one church, where we have our unity is in Christ, right, and therefore there are lots of diversities within that unity. Got the numbers up here, right? So the 15238 median household income is 125 grand. The Blornox, which is 15238. Is 43 grand. Wow. The Fox Chapel borough is 250 grand.
250 grand.
Yeah. So
that's where our church is at, right? Yeah.
Well,
we're in Fox Chapel borough.
We are, and we're in 15238, and we're in Allegheny County. So it's really interesting. If you're an Allegheny County person, the average household income is 72K. So Blornox 43, Allegheny 72, Fox Chapel 250. Big difference.
Yeah.
And so how do you incorporate people who have radically different kind of lifestyles? That's a big challenge, I think, for us.
Well, I think we run into this actually a lot of times. Well, first off, I think I grew up in a wealthy sort of suburb like Fox Chapel, and the thing that I noticed, My youth pastor actually once said this to me. He said he'd never been in a place where youth had so much, he saw so much failure to thrive among young people.
Yeah.
Because you often have successful parents and family networks that are very preoccupied, and there are a lot of obligations. And young people don't really have any kind of affirmative vision for their lives. So where there is a lot of money in a society, there become a lot of, with every dollar, there's an opportunity for sin, essentially, and things can get complicated really fast. So I think a lot of people in this town would probably see a lot of the money that they have or that their network has as sort of an enslaving force in a lot of ways.
It's an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? That part of what makes us feel good is the idea that we might improve our lives a little bit. And so statistically, if you're earning 50 or 60,000, this is the happiness index that I think Penn State and Harvard did together.
Yeah.
If you earn sort of 50, 60, 70,000, you could imagine earning 5,000 or 6,000 more and having a big lifestyle change. But if you earn 250,000, it's quite hard for you to imagine earning what would be necessary to have a big lifestyle change, which probably would mean another 100.
Yeah.
So there's an element, I think, of this pressure to earn. What do you do if your dad has been really successful, for example, and you're a boy and you want to be like dad, but your dad earns $1 million? The chances of you having that kind of income profile are almost none. And so it's quite easy to feel like you failed in a place like Fox Chapel, and worse, perhaps if you've had really good education or access to tutoring and great food and all sorts of things like that, and experiences, and you've traveled the world, you can't just say, well, look, I never got the opportunity. So a huge amount of pressure on kids in this town.
My word to those young people is, have you ever considered a career in the church?
Have you ever? What foul-minded perversity. Yeah, I think Blackadder is very destructive for us in that matter. Well, I mean, actually, that we're referencing a Blackadder sketch there. The essence of the comedy, at least most British comedy, cycles around this idea that you've got a sort of middle-class man, usually a man, who is trying to get above his station and become upper class. But he keeps being brought down by people who are working class. He keeps being thwarted, and he keeps being exposed as being what he really is, which is middle class. There are some women, Hyacinth Bouquet in Keeping Up Appearances and The Vicar of Dibley, great examples of that. But there's tons of Blackadder, Basil Fawlty, loads of characters like that. Yeah,
I mean, I think I have a soft spot for those folks because in some ways my own story was a lot like that, of being, coming from growing up in an upwardly mobile, affluent society and trying to figure out what is the way of Jesus when there are all kinds of strings pulling at you. And how do you navigate your sense of identity and self? Where do you get your sense of security from? What's your future all about? I think Paul's speaking into all of this. That's
the risks with money, right? That money is actually really helpful. I mean, if it will insulate you from lots of things, it can be very, very helpful. So, and of course, if you get used to people serving you, you get used to people waiting on you, you get used to being given advantages. Yeah. I mean, my joke would be that, what are the rules of the road in Fox Chapel? Well, you always give way to a German car. That's the rules of the road. And, there's some truth in that. There's jokes online about BMW parking and all sorts of things. So what do you do? That vehicle, by the way, has been designed with something called a command position. So the cockpit of the vehicle is designed to make you feel like you've been enthroned. So you have a V8 you have a throne with a V8 attached to it.
Yeah.
And so everything in your life is telling you that the tactile surfaces, the interactions with people, all of it is telling you you're a big deal.
And that's not good. All of those little messages that get us, that's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
And I remember, I mean, I'm going a little too autobiographical here, but I just remember when the church plant went down like 6 years ago, and I needed a job to feed my family, and there was Trader Joe's, and I came within a fraction of blowing off the first interview simply because I had been in the town in which I was raised. To be 30 years old and bagging groceries means you're a profound disappointment. And so there was a certain baggage that I carried, and that actually getting that job and being put in the position of service was really liberating for me.
Interesting.
And actually meant more. It was a financial boon for us, right?
In seminary it was the same for me. I think, we got government vegetable vouchers, we got kind of food stamps of a sort, but they had pictures of food on them, on the understanding that many of the people receiving them would not be able to read. So they had sort of images of onions and things. Huh. And, to go to the grocery store with your vegetable vouchers was quite a humbling thing. Yeah. Now, I got around this by saving them all up and using them to buy 48 beers.
Good idea.
During an intense period of study.
Have you ever considered a career in the church?
Just right. Foul-minded perversity. But I got great results, actually. I got first-class remarks for that entire period of study. A very intense period of work and stellar. But notwithstanding that, it is actually quite a humiliating thing. And so you have the poverty can be very humiliating. And I got to play with poverty for 2 years,
and humiliating.
I've never been really, really poor.
Humiliating or humbling. I guess both start with the same experience. Mm-hmm. Humiliation leaves you in shambles. Mm-hmm. Being humbled puts you toward a more certain set of riches, right?
So indeed. So verse 17, in this present age, charge them not to be haughty. Don't fall for everything in your life is telling you that you are a big deal. Don't fall for it.
You're not.
And don't set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches either. Everything in your life is telling you that this is where security is to be found. Your savings, your investments, your invest in yourself, your qualifications, your earning capacity and potential.
So your identity and your security are not financially determined.
Right.
Which is contrary to what Marx would say, and much of the secular ideology. All the secular ideology would say.
It's kind of funny that you say that. Yeah,
your identity is largely dependent on whether you're an empowered group or not, and your security is stems from that.
Yeah, I think Aldous Huxley in Brave New World kind of applied that idea of children created in sort of test tubes and bottles, and they were predetermined to be an epsilon or an alpha or what have you. And so your whole life was mapped out based upon how you'd been bred in that book. Yeah. And it's very easy for you to have a sort of positive fatalism that say, oh, look, I'm a super person because I've got this money. Yeah. And, I hope that I'll get more, and all of my faith and kind of prospects and everything are tied up with it. It is not, though, to say that being rich is a bad thing or that you're a bad person if you are. It doesn't say that. And he doesn't say that the solution is always to get rid of it all. Mm-hmm. Not at all. What he says the solution is to do is to put your hope on God, who richly provides us with everything. We sometimes would say it at the offertory, all things have come from you and of your own have we given you. Yeah. From 2 Chronicles.
So Paul is calling the rich into greater abundance, not into a scarcity mindset.
To enjoy the fact that God's given you stuff. If you've got a load of stuff from God, thank God that you have a load of stuff. And don't forget to worship God. The trap or temptation for you have a peculiar risk profile as a wealthy person. Yeah. That you might become a bit haughty or you might become a bit hopeful in money. But notwithstanding that, the call to you as a wealthy person is the same as the call to a poor person, which is to put your faith in God. It's just easier for a poor person.
Yeah. I think that just pastorally, I worry that, because I see it myself, it's really easy to sort of like give lip service to that idea and be like, okay, I won't trust in my riches. Right. I won't trust in my wealth. I won't trust in money. And nothing concretely changes in my life. I still get into the same car where I'm in the command position.
Mm-hmm.
I still eat most of my meals being served by another person. And all of those signals, all those experiences gradually form me into a position where I become more and more, I gravitate constantly back to haughtiness. So I guess my point is, being rich is not bad. The Bible never says that. Being rich is dangerous. It is extremely dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous. And so there are some basic solutions provided. And the first one would be to set your hope on God.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing would be to use your money for the kingdom and to enjoy it. So this is an intriguing thing, because you might expect it to say something like this. Riches are very dangerous, right? They're a great trap. We've talked about what happens when you fall into traps.
Yes.
Your life falls apart, and eventually your eternal life falls apart, right? And so the solution is to get rid of it all. It doesn't say that. What it says is this is verse 18, they, the rich, are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. So there's this call to a really open-handed kingdom use of your resources. This isn't about necessarily getting rid of everything. It's about maximizing its effectiveness.
Thus storing up treasure for themselves. That's an allusion to the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
Right? Do not store up treasure for yourselves on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in to steal.
Yeah.
But store it up in heaven.
And it would, you might say, well, it goes back to what he said in verse 7 above, which is, we brought nothing into the world and we cannot take anything out of the world.
Yeah.
So you can't take your physical money or possessions with you, but you can start to invest in eternity in some way by the way that you use your money. So now, if you are a rich person, and we are, I know I read those stats about Blawnox and Allegheny and Fox Chapel, but by any historical global standards, we're all rich.
Yeah, those are all...
They're relative.
Yeah, relative to the globe, we're all in
very much
top.
So, and that's not to belittle the fact that, in fact, if you are actually trying to run a family of 4 on an income of 40 grand, that's really horribly difficult. But it's worth noting that by historical standards, we have quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so what are we going to do? We're going to do good, and we're going to be rich in good works. And when we start to advance the kingdom of God with our physical possessions, our money, our time, we actually invest in our future. We'll maybe come back to what that would look like in a minute. But before we think about what heaven looks like, let's think about what earth looks like. What does it look like to be rich in good works and to be generous and ready to share? How do we do it?
Yeah.
What can we do?
I think devote yourself to, you need to be a part of a community.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly it.
So Jenna and I have listened to this author named Andy Crouch. He writes a lot about technology and about modern society. He's a Christian, and he talks about this concept of liquidity. And it says one of the ails of our society is that people have their assets are largely liquid. They can, if they needed to, they could pick up and relocate their life to the West Coast or the East Coast with relative ease. You know, they're not deeply invested in a community.
Gotcha.
You know, you're renting your apartment or something like that. He said, the spiritual life requires being grounded in a community. And so so it means limiting your options. You're actually, so invest in something like buy a house.
And I do think about people who've left here for work and things, who have said to me that they are devastated to be leaving Christchurch. And, you know, they've said, you know, we've been in our new place now for 6 months or 2 years even, and we just never found a place like this. And whilst that's sad, I'm actually really pleased to hear that getting a new job and leaving Pittsburgh, leaving Christchurch for our members ought to be the worst thing that's happened to them.
Yeah.
That ought to be the worst aspect of the move. Otherwise, there's something not quite right about our claim to be a community church preaching the gospel.
Yeah. So I think, you rub shoulders with an actual community of actual people with whom you sacrifice, and sometimes they sacrifice for you.
There you go.
And that, I mean, you and Robert have, had this joke around the office about
Well, the 100.
You're like, passing the same
this $100
back and forth as everyone's needs arise.
We've got a sort of internal market economy in the staff team. we've all just given the same gift card back and forth for
we kind of
10 years.
Yeah, we kind of have. But like that creates
that's a good use of kingdom money right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
every time we've invested and it's the same money.
Yeah.
What a return.
Well, it sort of is a beautiful picture of actually trading and community and a use of money that brings you together with other people. And, as you give away to someone else who is in need in the church, if you're a part of a community, there's a certain security in that because you know that someone else has your back too.
So it's funny because I've had in my mind the image of a meal here. The image of sharing a meal or sharing your kitchen in particular. I think, for example, quite a few people, my mother-in-law, they've got new kitchens, right? Because that's the life stage we're at, is new kitchen stage. And, kitchen, really expensive thing to buy. Yeah. And, that's a big ticket item.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually a really good kingdom item, buying a new kitchen. Because it's something that's very, very usable for the kingdom. You can cook in it. You can invite the neighbours in. It's possible that people listening to this are maybe the only Christian in their street or apartment building. And so their kitchen is an incredibly important kingdom resource.
Yeah.
Because you can cook and have a meal with your neighbours. And I've been wondering right until this very moment why the image of a kitchen was so strong for me. And I just put my mouse over the word share, ready to share. And it's koinonia.
Koinonia, ready to fellowship.
Communion.
Yeah,
it's the word that we would use to describe fellowship and Holy Communion in a way, the kind of being together.
That's really cool.
It is kind of cool. So I think a great thing you can do if you have resources such as a kitchen is you can open that up, cook for your neighbours.
Yeah,
you can put people around a table, start to feast.
Yeah, and it connects you with other people.
Yeah,
which ultimately is a kind of wealth that no number of dollars in a bank account can make up for.
No,
right?
That's right. So that they may take hold of that which is truly life. The real trueness of life, I think, is this depth of human relationship.
Yeah, and
not just numbers on a bank balance.
It's hard. Like I think we've said, who was it that called our town an anti-community?
Well, that was Scott Schaefer. He was the pastor at the Methodist Church.
Yeah, and I think it's in a lot of ways it's true that there are certain things about the structure of our society that push us away from one another.
For sure.
And people grow increasingly isolated and desperate for connection. And connection and wealth is something that's generative. It's generated as people come together and discover more valuable things. You actually become more wealthy in a real sense. So
it might be worth just thinking, before we think about eternity, just thinking about our church as a community that has resources. So the church has a bank, it has a budget, it has investments, it has a property. So that the church, which is all of us listening to this, has resources, and yet needs them too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting for us now corporately how we apply these principles as opposed to just individually. And this is on our minds, mine and yours, because we just got back from diocesan convention, where we see a list of all the churches, and we see a list of how much money they have, and there are 4 or 5 with more than us.
Yeah.
And like 50 with less.
Yeah.
So we're doing really well.
Yeah, our church has a lot of money.
So you can almost feel, I mean, I can almost feel a little bit ashamed at these kind of meetings. Oh, look, we don't get any bragging rights because we're not out there doing really hard work on nothing. And, I've had other ministers come up to me and say, it's all right for you. You're in Fox Chapel judging us.
Yep.
And I would say, first of all, it's actually quite expensive to do ministry here. And secondly, how are we using it?
Mm-hmm.
I love that church kitchen. Like Bacon Sunday is one of my favourite things.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that we can just crank out 200 bacon and egg sandwiches for Christmas.
And over with the wealth that our community has, I think the aim is radically subversive of the anti-community that Fox Chapel kind of is. Right. You have instead people who live in Blawnox, people who live in Cheswick, people who live in across the river or
Gibsonia, Plum.
Yeah,
we've got some people from the city.
People, all of these people together, having a community, drinking coffee, eating kids eating massive amounts of snacks together. It's noisy and it's
the snack eating. I think is a great example of what someone who is rich would provide.
Yeah,
we don't. That English thing. There's a very British idea that basically in a church, any kind of show of generosity is considered to be immoral. So the tea ladies are ironing tea bags from last week and putting them on a clothesline to reuse, and buying broken cookies because they're cheaper. And
being magnanimous is not seen as a value.
A begging bowl next to the coffee. I've resisted a begging bowl next to the coffee probably more than any other thing I've resisted in my ministry.
Yeah. Good.
That is not hospitality.
No.
Someone came around your house for dinner and you charged them $8. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
But how do we do this? How do we be generous? How do we light the fire and pay the extra gas? How do we warm the building 2 more degrees so that it's comfortable? How do we provide 3 snacks for every kid and pizza at the youth group and not just, ramen? How do we...
I think for all of us, it means dying a little bit to ourselves and our vision of self-promotion and trusting, and the way that we can we concretely do that is through giving. And I think that makes when we give to the church, more opportunities for ministry open up, and then we all kind of are into this generative, virtuous cycle of dreaming about how do we use the resources that we have.
So the resources we got to hire Tammy to be what Connie Hughes used to call the youth pastor to the elderly. So that's pastoral care minister. Focus on the retired mostly, is amazing because I've seen. Tammy drives out to Cabot regularly to see Jane Newbert. Yeah. Jane Newbert wouldn't get any visits.
Yeah.
She's regularly going to see Jean up on 910.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
She's so well known in Longwood that, I go over there and people say, do you work with Tammy? And they love the fact she plays music. And I think about the amount of time and energy she poured into BB and Betsy and 2 ladies who died recently. These are people who've had the privilege of real kingdom ministry at a time of life where sometimes you get overlooked. It's only been possible because we've got resources.
Yeah.
To dedicate to that group alone. Same with you, right? You're doing this role in the diocese at the moment with youth and a potential youth gathering of the diocese.
Yeah.
So you see the state of other churches and what they have in youth ministry, and you know what it takes to gather a youth group.
And that work is possible because I am in a church that supports me. I'm not spending half of my time either working at Trader Joe's or raising my salary. I actually have felt this, and I've seen this in a very concrete way because I've worked here part-time before, and I've seen the results of that. And
that's interesting.
It can be an okay thing. But ultimately, I think that the fruit that comes from investing, having a person invest their whole working life into the community is a lot greater than sort of the Mickey Mouse approach of doing trying to do more with little investment. You have to invest. You have to invest in the community. It's just a reality. And whether it's my salary or you hire somebody else, that's immaterial. It's just having someone who is dedicated to that work.
I think about that other night, where you had Kat and I join you with the seniors, the high school kids, right?
Yeah.
So we had a really full room with those high school kids. It was full.
Yeah, it was jam-packed.
And then in a different building, there's a whole group of middle schoolers that I didn't even get to see. And I think that's phenomenal to see that the youth group has tripled, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of...
We started off low.
It started off with 0.
Well, then it's more than tripled.
So that's a 2,000% increase. We started off at the pandemic, but it's grown to the point that there's more than 20 kids on a Sunday, plus about 5 to 7 adults. So it's
right. So there's discipleship, there's mentoring going on all across the age groups, and that's taken resources, and we see what this church was like when it had less to spend on that, and we see what other churches are like when they have nothing to spend on it. And so people giving money to the church are enabling us as a body to open our kitchen up and serve everybody, to visit people that would be neglected, and to just exponentially reach a whole new age group.
Yeah.
And that, please, let's think a little bit about eternity now, right? So what are the eternal ramifications of using God's money in a way that is richly to provide?
Yeah.
We're not buying our way into heaven.
No. You rather, you're freed from the need to justify yourself or form your identity or your security through your own resources. And so therefore, God enables you to do something with your money that builds relationship. I worked at a camp that had this, you'd walk in and there was this, or drive down the drive, and there was this big gazebo, and on the gazebo was this big wooden plaque that said, "Life is a relationship." And I love that. There's a lot that was not super healthy about that camp, but that was right on. Life is relationship. And our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. Yeah. And as we surrender what we have to God, He actually has a way of giving back to us by pulling us into relationship with other people. And that's something that, relationships have an eternal dimension.
Yeah.
Material things do not.
That's a good point. And so our use of money now is going to, I guess, function as a kind of treasure in eternity.
Yeah.
A more lasting treasure.
Yeah.
But we're not buying our way into heaven, and I think that has to be said over and over and over and over again. Okay. Because it's so easy for a minister to manipulate this passage and say, you need to give more money to the church and then God will let you in.
One of the things that I've thought about with my own giving, so I have like the bank account automatic withdrawal, that kind of thing. Yeah. Because I'm A, forgetful, and B, I have a naturally sort of stingy disposition, I think. Yeah.
I'm saying because I'm listening.
Yeah, you're like, yep, yeah, you are. So I was thinking about this, I don't think that's actually the final, I don't think that's God's final trajectory for me, because I think there's what's ultimately He's after is for us to have this joyful, self-forgetful posture of spontaneous, joyful generosity, both spontaneous and regularly disciplined, that kind of wells up, where man, I can't wait to give more. That kind of thing, rather than this is something that I do because I know it's the right thing to do, but it hurts, I think that I think there's a real joy that God is calling us into. So
it's a funny thing, isn't it, when you think about that rich young ruler that Jesus encountered?
Yeah.
Right. And so there's an there's an ideal response, and the ideal response is he sells everything and follows Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a terrible response, which is he goes away and he just keeps it all.
Yeah.
But there's the possibility of something in between, I guess, where the rich young ruler goes away and gives a bit and partially obeys, partially disobeys Jesus and sees what happens and sort of gets there. I mean, there's nothing in the text that says the rich young man had to die that night. I mean, some people do. The guy storing up the stuff in the barns did.
Yeah.
But there must be people who will take more than one sermon or one morning or one moment to go from grave life-threatening disobedience to abundant giving, right? There must be lots of people who are going to have a process and not an instant change.
Well, we're all in process.
Right. And so you just wonder what would have happened to that young man if he'd said, look, I'll do you a deal. I'll give you 10%. Jesus would be like,
That's funny.
Jesus would be like, well, no, that's not, no, because you're still kind of keeping control. You've got a problem. But
you keep following me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see, you're still here.
I don't know. That's an interesting, I get where you're going with it. I think it's good to obey everything that Jesus says full up, but like,
well, the disciples didn't.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's what I'm playing with this idea. It's a dangerous idea. I don't want to preach heresy.
Well, the virtue is, I think your point is like, start with where you can. Like a 1% incremental increase is better than a 0%, right? So, taking the first baby step toward following Jesus in sacrificial giving is better than just crossing your arms and saying, well, I can't go all the way.
And what will happen is that God will encourage you along with that journey, and you will start to see, I think, all sorts of fruit in your life.
Yeah.
That is not to say that you'll suddenly make a load more money, but the haughtiness problem and the uncertainty problem might start to go away.
And that will make you happier.
I don't worry about money anymore. I used to. A lot.
Yeah.
Every now and then, as I preached, I do worry about it again. Every now and then I slip back into an old mindset. But for the most part, I don't worry about money anymore.
Yeah.
And in fact, a few times in the last few years, I've said or done things that have surprised me because I've actually been confident about money.
Yeah.
Which I really didn't see coming.
Huh.
The building project would be a great example.
Yeah.
Right. There is a time where I'd have been terrified about that and really disappointed. And right now I'm really optimistic.
Yeah, I know.
So there is something to be said about obeying Jesus fully. And there's something to be said about if it takes you a while to get there, provided you get the time to get there.
Well, Jesus is really very accommodating. I'm thinking when he says to the Pharisees in John, well, if you don't believe my words, at least believe on account of the works themselves that I've done. Right. So he's saying like...
Or Nicodemus, who kind of comes to see him in John 3 by night,
yeah,
in secret to ask questions. And then he appears again in the middle of the letter, kind of a bit more neutral. And then at the end of the letter, intriguingly, he's identifying with Christ. And, I think they're at the burial maybe.
Yeah, like he makes his... Yeah, well, that's because the good news of the gospel is not... not your response to the gospel. Your response to the gospel is not the gospel.
There you go. That's semi-Pelagianism. Yeah.
Like rather, God is doing something, and we're invited into it, and we're all failing in our response all the time.
Yeah,
but still, he has his way, and maybe he's just like opening the door just the littlest bit for some of us, and moving this year, and then the next year it's a little bit more, and then all of a sudden, it rushes in.
My hope would be that at least happens in our church.
Yeah,
and I think what we see then is massive dehortification of the congregation. We become less haughty. and a re-hoping of the congregation. We switch our hope from the uncertainty of riches to the certainty of God. And so when you have a congregation that's humble and really certain about God, well, you start to see all sorts of things. This isn't just going to be, oh, well, we carry on the same, but we've got a bit more money. The whole congregation changes. It becomes far more attractive, far more powerful. People are more liberated.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, the church has more money, which means we can take care of our staff better. It means we can do things like the youth and the pastoral care ministry.
I've thought about this. Like, I think, I think that it's good for our church to grow, to have a bigger budget, to have more resources and do more things.
Yeah.
I think God has been forming over the years the character of both us and the leaders around us and the systems to be able to handle all of that with godliness and responsibility and if the church just like one year had like a $1 million surplus, like in that moment be like, we don't know what to do with this, but like
our corporate character is being formed so that we can actually handle it.
Yeah, I think that's the prayer. Like we want to be people who use money really well, who steward it, and do kingdom work, and we have a clear sense of what God is doing in and among us, so that when we all give, that's not money that's being wasted.
Right.
So I think that there's something to that it's not bad for the church to ask for more money. We have to be prayerful and responsible and work hard and grow into the people who can use it the way that he wants us to use it.
Mm-hmm. And what's that going to look like? It's going to look like rich generosity.
Yeah.
Good works, ready to share.
Yeah.
There's going to be a corporate blessing.
I love this series because it's become so apparent that both of us are really works in process on this whole thing. And we're sort of like confronting our own demons a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
And in real time, but
it's been helpful, hasn't it?
I've had Jack Miller, the late pastor, said that he called the pastor the chief repenter in the congregation.
Yeah.
The first person to say, yeah, I got this wrong. But here's the step forward in following Jesus.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. I've
Thanks,
appreciated
Alex.
this.
Yeah,
you're going to wrap up the letter for us next week, I think.
Yep.
Well, this has been a podcast of Christ Church Fox Chapel. Really glad that you could join us. Thanks for stopping by, of course.
But mostly, stay classy.